Hi, this is Editing Phineas. Real quick, because Zoom started wanting to charge us, we're switching to using Discord and a bot to record the podcast, but some background audio settings weren't set quite right, apparently. So having looked into it, we should have that fixed for the next recording, which will be happening tomorrow. The recording that we did a couple days ago is being split in two because it ended up being almost 3 hours of audio that I had to cut down. So this episode is going to be around an hour. The next episode, around an hour. After that, the audio should be more clear, though. So I apologize for any weird garbledness you hear. Those issues should be fixed now. I hope you enjoy the episode, and of course, feel free always to reach out with how you feel about it, or arguments that you've heard that you think are bullshit, or feedback, or things that got wrong could use clarification, etc. As much as this is me making a podcast, the conversations that happen on it need to be community-based, because we can't all just be islands unto ourselves. So, as always, the email is powered by apostasy@gmail.com. If there's anything that catches you and you want to reach out, enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to the Apostate's Playground. I am pissed, but on the show I go by Finn, or Phineas. And joining me is C.
Hello. I too am pissed.
That's why we use pseudonyms.
Or just tired. That's a terrible joke. I heard it.
That's what you get when you come here. You get terrible jokes about my obviously fake name. So, originally, because it's been a while since anything's released, originally it was going to come back with a history lesson on God's wife. And it was going to,
Not a re-recording of
we're going to do a re-recording of Genesis 32, because it's been a while, right? Like, found some materials, found some records we can do, found some stuff, and then the Supreme Court did the thing. And I said in a blog post that whether or not they reference religion in the decision, and they don't, it is a step towards theocracy. And since then, we have seen preachers and religious organizations coming out and celebrating. And then today, as we're recording, as of this morning in Kennedy v. Bremerton, they ruled that school officials can just pray anywhere during school hours, which effectively uses social pressure to force kids into participating in religious rituals. And that episode will be coming also. But those same people are cheering for the fact that Roe was overturned. And the Supreme Court justices were put there largely to do this, right? This was a big point. This is what Trump said he wanted to do. This is what all the people who are smarter than me said they were going to do. And also, this is what I said they were going to do.
This has been in motion in their intentions for like many years.
Yeah, if you listen to this podcast at all ever, you know that abortion is what was used to galvanize the religious right, because Jerry Falwell got sad he couldn't do a racism. So they did it. And it's going to get worse unless something happens. So to start with, because only one of us has a uterus,
Trying to fix
for now.
that. Or not. Who knows? I won't confess to anything.
So because only one of us has a vulva.
Okay. I don't know what's safe from there.
It's just like, that's where I keep my balls. I don't know. I want to talk about like my philosophical position on abortion, just real fast. especially because it colors. When I say like I think about something, you know, my philosophical view is I don't mean abstractly. Philosophy is just a bunch of people saying things unless it's something that's being actualized. So I just mean my reasoning, right? Because personally, I find abortion kind of distasteful. I'm not a fan of the idea. And the crazy part is people who have had abortions probably agree with that. I'm going to imagine, I imagine that if the options were get an abortion and be stigmatized or just not have gotten pregnant in the first place, they also would prefer they not have gotten pregnant in the first place. But people do get pregnant. So two ideas that are going to be recurring for me are the doctrine of double effect and the violin player. The doctrine of double effect was covered by Philippa Foot in the same essay that she used to talk about the trolley problem. And basically it says that if you do a thing knowing that a side effect is going to be bad, you did a bad thing. Even if it's not the thing you did. It's kind of, if you kill the mommy bird out of cruelty, the fact that the baby bird starved to death, you did that too. So that's going to come up because they overturned Roe. And all of the people with uteruses who die because of unsafe procedures, that blood is going to be on the hands of the Supreme Court.
Not just unsafe procedures either. In cases where it's an emergency and it's like, well, she's going to, excuse me, not she, but that person is going to die in the process of the labor, delivery, or whatever, unless
that's going to happen too. I think that 6 states that the trigger laws that went into effect ban abortion in any circumstances, including if the mother's life is at risk or the parent's life is at risk. Oh, I know. Also rape and incest. You have to carry that. And there's, I think, that's 13 that had trigger laws in total. Most of which say,
yeah, that sounds about what I saw. I read earlier today. A glance, it was like 13.
And most of them say that, in cases of rape, incest, and if it'll kill the holder of the symbiote. Parasite. I like symbiote.
Symbiote implies that it implies that yes, it implies that they're both, that it's a relationship that is equal exchange. Like both parties are getting something out of it.
The bird cleans the rhino's horn or whatever, and the rhino protects the bird.
Yeah.
There's a fish that cleans sharks. So yeah, the parasite. And the thing is, part of the reason why I want to do this is because my views on abortion actually don't start with people with uteruses. For me, my position on abortion completely disregards whether or not somebody has a uterus. And it starts with Judith Jarvis Thomson. The thought experiment says, like, okay, what if you wake up and you're attached to a violinist and he's the world's greatest violinist, because that's one of the things that, like, well, what if you get an abortion and it was the greatest violinist in the world or someone who cured cancer? And like, first off, no, it's not. Both statistically and because it got aborted.
There's a lot of issues with that, but yeah, go ahead.
So is it wrong to unhook yourself from the violinist knowing that the violinist will die?
This feels so rhetorical.
It kind of is, because she was responding to Don Marquis' why abortion is immoral. And he did the, it's immoral because it's a human and killing the baby, blah, blah, blah. So her response was basically like, look, let's say it is a baby. Fuck you, you're still wrong.
Truly the response we all want to have. Right?
So from there, I kind of go a different direction from it with a lot of people, because, like, what is the issue there? The issue there is that you're being made to give up your bodily resources. Okay, so let's say somebody is pregnant and it's my fault. I mean, they were there too, but
I mean, technically, it's still your fault because you're the party who you're the one who's part of that exchange that can
I
make
know,
it happen.
regardless of what they say, I can shoot the DNA wherever. Ew.
Yeah.
It's a gross process. So if they, like, for whatever reason, right, they can't, their kidneys are bad and the baby needs dialysis, like, they can't tackle me and hook me to a machine, right? Like, if one of my kids needs bone marrow when they get older, they can't just tackle me with a hacksaw, because there is an entitlement to bodily resources. And when a human is fermenting a tiny human, like, there is bodily resources, both, there's space, there's nutrients, there's potential long-term physical change, there's probable long-term physical change, there's
Yeah, I think it's I don't know. I guess it makes sense to say probable, but I feel like it's closer to like more like guaranteed, or I don't know, because I mean there's so much that has to like change and alter and
yeah.
everything, and I guess maybe some things do revert back, but I mean there's no 100% going back, I don't
No,
think.
I don't think there is either, but I'm not a baby scientist. Like,
You're
yeah,
playing it safe.
I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not in obstetrics. But I mean, there's things like children, when you're pregnant, the fetus eats your gray matter. Yeah,
Oh God.
like pregnancy brain on a very real level.
Yeah, I've heard about that before, but I never realized what it actually meant. That's horror movie shit.
I'm not
I don't
actually
even
sure the two
know.
are linked. I just know that there's an amount of gray matter that's used to
Still horrific.
generate a small ape monster. So yeah, like that, and that's where the clincher is for me, right? Is the fact that it's not, a lot of times the argument takes it out and makes it about people with uteruses. And that creates a second group that then has to justify, well, it doesn't have to, is being made to justify, which is different.
It kind of singles, I guess, the way it kind of singles them out and makes it their problem
Right.
only.
And
Like,
that's what I don't like.
oh yeah.
So like that's kind of my, like, where I'm coming from on abortion, is the fact that for me what it comes down to is, if you accept that a fetus is a person, it doesn't matter, because then you're in the conversation of one person is not entitled to another person's bodily resources. That's it.
Mhm.
So I sometimes talk about it weird, and I sometimes talk about it like I should probably watch myself. And it's not a lane I get into often, but like, that's my view. Is what it comes down to is one person is not entitled to another person's bodily resources, regardless of how you feel about it personally, regardless of whether or not you have a uterus. Because so like the other thing, the reason why, the other thing, let me try again, because I started and aborted 4 sentences. The other thing is the idea that like men should stay out of it, or I guess people who are male presenting, because I don't identify in the binary.
People with sperm.
People
maybe?
who it's not going to be a problem for them.
People who can
Yeah,
get
there we go.
pregnant.
There's the
Okay.
idea that they should stay out of the conversation. And that would be great. Except that people who it's not going to be an issue for them keep making laws. Like,
Yeah, they're already in the
yeah, like
conversation.
at what point is it?
They've Kool-Aid man through the wall and they're just not leaving.
We were talking earlier and about how like half the country is upset about Roe. And we started talking about people like, well, there's some women who are like dancing around cheering like, yeah, I don't have the same amount of rights I did, a week ago. But there's also probably enough dudes that are upset, like really bad, that it kind of balances out.
We're just swapping
yeah, right.
people.
Red Rover. No, women should be, people with uteruses should have the right for other people to get the fuck out of their way. Other people should be supporting those efforts. And this is going to be good practice because there's a race episode coming up, and I'm going to have very similar feelings about that, being a white human who is going to be explaining race to a black woman. So
yeah, should be good. You like college again.
If you like hearing me walk on eggshells, stay tuned. Yeah, that's where I'm coming from. I think I think I have a stronger position than is generally represented, and it's represented here because it doesn't require that people with uteruses be removed from humanity in order to have the conversation. It's just very simple, not entitled to his bodily rights, their bodily right, his bodily resources, their bodily resources, her bodily resources. End of story. And it also, I feel like it's probably a more necessary way to make the argument now, because by taking people with uteruses and removing them, it feels icky towards trans men. Trans men have uteruses. Trans men can get pregnant, and it feels like in order to say, no, you have to go stand over there with the girls now, because this is how we're making the argument. It feels like not making the argument in a way that doesn't do that is doing them a disservice and doing them a harm. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't know where you're coming from. Fuck Whitey. Except Clarence Donner.
My standard, misandry. Let's say I'm coming from there. I'm just coming from a position of just tired, over it. I mean, I used to, when I was a kid, forever and ever ago, back when there was way less information and education because internet was still pretty brand new, had some really dumbass ideas, opinions on stuff. But, obviously I've gotten older and I've read things and things make more sense now. And no, I'm just coming at it from a position of, even if it wasn't me and I never ever, and the plants never have to need to, but even if I never ever have to, that, it would still be nice to have that, like, just in case. And also, I care about other people. So it's like, even if I never need it, plenty of people will probably need it. And whether or not they need it, it's autonomy.
Yeah.
It's their right. They have access to it. If they need it or not. Like, I'm not going to be selfish and be like, no, I don't need it. You don't need it. Like, it just
right. Well, and like earlier when I said that abortion is distasteful, I would like for abortion rates to come down because of comprehensive sex ed and easily accessible contraception. Like,
that the foundation.
Yeah, like it's like, I find abortion distasteful, and I'd like rates to come down by doing the things that will make that happen organically and create a better, more educated society overall. Like, I don't. But yeah, it's doing the things that get it to come down organically that, and that I think everybody finds it distasteful, but some people need to, fuck themselves off a bridge. Speaking of people who need to fuck themselves off a bridge, the Supreme Court held in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health, quote, held, the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey are overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion is returned to the people and their elected representatives. I think right there is long enough to make an hour-long episode screaming about, because that's some bullshit on a lot of levels. Like, firstly, that's not how government works. It's just not. It never has been. I am not a Democrat because that party has never been far enough left. And also because I don't believe in democracy. I think democracy is the best answer at the moment. And I am really curious for what we come up with that's better. Because right now, what leaving it up to the elected representatives mean is that, a dozen, Baker's dozen states just had trigger laws go into effect
that was made by those representatives. It means that gerrymandered districts are not being represented, even if they make up the most of the state. It means that in Florida right now, the 5th district, which DeSantis is in court because he's trying to break up, because, you know, it's a very heavily black district, and they keep sending black representatives to Washington who are just blacking about the place. So he's trying to break that up. But that's not leaving it to the people and their elected representatives. That's packing and cracking and gerrymandering, which the Supreme Court has upheld. So right out of the gate, before you even get to the opinion, there's just a pile of bullshit about the fact that, like, yeah, no, it's not up to the people and their elected representatives. It's up to the Republican Party who steals elections. Then there's also the fact that if it were up to the people and their elected representatives, we would have more abortion access. Pew found that sizable majorities of Americans said abortion should be legal if a woman's health is at stake at 78%, or if the pregnancy was a result of rape or incest, 69%, which, yeah, I can't think of a time where that number is less appropriate. Really? 69? You can't. Are you sure it wasn't like,
Somebody definitely rounded up.
68.8? Are we sure? Can we double check?
They rounded up.
Can we find 11,000 votes? And just over half said that it should be legal if the baby was likely to be born with severe disabilities or health issues. That is from Vox. And I have some pretty big feelings about that. You know, it was all of the hospitals in the area are all Catholic. So abortion, even though abortion is protected in this state, because I live on a coast state that isn't, you know, one of the East Coast southern ones, abortion wasn't really an option. I'm Planned Parenthood, but like at a hospital, abortion wasn't an option if it was an emergency situation, because of the Pope, who gets, like, the Catholic Church gets to dictate healthcare decisions to a lot of people. So
another old guy.
So like all of that was already kind of for meaning, but now it doesn't mean any. And while that is, like, to be fair, and this is from Vox, and while that is tough to gauge, when it comes to short notice, you don't do a lot better than Pew and Gallup. YouGov did find that a lot of people don't know a lot about abortion, which isn't terribly surprising, considering the fact that a lot of people have their knowledge of abortion tainted by the propaganda industrial complex. And according to Teresa Undem, co-founder of the research firm Periundum, the bottom line is that the public wants people making these decisions around abortion, not the government. And it reminded me of Pete Buttigieg was asked about this. Buttigieg?
I've never actually heard it.
Yeah, I've heard it. It hasn't been for a while. But he was asked about abortion, how he felt about it. And he said the state doesn't have a place in it, because if it's a moral decision, then it needs to be made between somebody and moral leaders. And if it's a medical decision, it needs to be made between that person and their doctors. And that's it. Alito says that abortion can't be considered part of liberty because liberty isn't clearly defined, which, fuck that. Like,
you can't clearly define liberty.
Well, he says at one point that some historian, it's in the notes later, some historian went over how, you know, people have used liberty and found over 200 different ways it was used. And it's like, yeah, but we know what people are talking about. Like, that's how language works, you paternalistic, infantilizing asshole. We know how liberty is used. We know what it means when people say liberty. Because, like, the word run has 42 definitions in the dictionary. And if I say to you, I left the water running, you're not going to think that my tap water is taking place in a marathon. That's just not, you're not going to think that. Because we all understand how words do because of how language are. Additionally, the term liberty appears in the due process clauses of both the 5th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution. As used in the Constitution, liberty means freedom from arbitrary or unreasonable restraint upon an individual. Freedom from restraint refers to more than just physical restraint, but also the freedom to act, I assume, according to one's own will. On numerous occasions, the Supreme Court has sought to explain what liberty means and what it encompasses. For example, in Meyer v. Nebraska, quote within a quote, liberty denotes not merely freedom from bodily restraint, but also the right of individual conduct. To engage in any of the common occupations of life, to acquire useful knowledge, to marry, establish a home, and bring up children, to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience, and generally to enjoy those privileges long recognized at common law as essential to the orderly pursuit of happiness by free men. In Boiling v. Sharp, quote unquote, liberty is not confined to mere freedom from bodily restraint. Liberty under law extends to the full range of conduct which the individual is free to pursue, and it cannot be restricted except for a proper governmental objective. And in Ingram v. Wright, it was stated that liberty includes freedom from bodily restraint and punishment, and a right to be free from and to obtain judicial relief for unjustified intrusions on personal security. And that is from the WEX definitions team. And I got that from the Legal Information Institute from Cornell Law School. That seems pretty clear. Hey, government, get the fuck out of my business. When going over the history of Roe, Alito points out that it was divisive. Who cares? A lot of people said boo. Again, who cares? And he gets, when he gets to Casey, he points out the fact that Casey did a lot of overruling Roe, which is kind of technically true. As I understand it, the precedent was actually Casey. Roe was the name that we all recognized because Roe had been gutted to the point where effectively what we were all going by was Casey. Lucky for us, it's not super relevant anymore because this ruling, it was very thorough and got rid of both. For clarity, though, quote, paradoxically, the judgment in Casey did a fair amount of overruling. Several important abortion decisions were overruled in toto, and Roe itself was overruled in part. Casey threw out Roe's trimester scheme and substituted a new rule of uncertain origin under which states were forbidden to adopt any regulation that imposed a undue burden on a woman's right to have an abortion. The decision provided no clear guidance about the difference between a due and an undue burden, but the three justices who authored the controlling opinion called the contending sides of a national controversy to end their national division by treating the court's decision as the final settlement of the question of the constitutional right to abortion. And then we're given the argument from people can't quit arguing, so fuck it, which is a pretty shit way for a country with 300 million people to operate. Right now we're in a position where we can't all agree on whether or not germs are real. So I guess we're all going back to the fucking miasma theory. A reoccurring theme in Alito's opinion is that, in the introduction, in the opinion, is that the Constitution makes no mention of abortion, and so Roe was an abuse of power, and as a matter of fact, that's gonna do a lot of damage. That very stupid idea.
The Constitution doesn't say a lot of things.
Yeah, right?
That's why there are amendments.
That is why there are amendments. And that's why originalism is brain rot, right? Like another thing this does, and this is a little philosophy jerk off, but it gets rid of the idea that the Constitution is a living document. It gets rid of that idea because it's saying that you can't go, oh, okay, you treat them like premises for your conclusion of your ruling. It's saying that's too much thinky math. And so we can't do the thinky math. We have to get rid of the thinky math, which is some bullshit when you're supposed to be the brightest legal minds in the country. And I kind of want to take advantage of the fact that the Constitution also doesn't say that I can't jerk off in Brett Kavanaugh's car or shit in Amy Coney Barrett's shoe. Like, like you said, there's lots of things the Constitution doesn't say. I don't understand how people think that's a good position. I've tried. I've tried because I try to be charitable. I try to understand what other people are thinking, and I can't figure that one out. That we should look at how you're treated on a plane according to what people who didn't know what planes were thought. Especially when the motherfucker who wrote it.
It's easier. It's just easier. It's just, instead of having to stop and think about everything and correct it and stuff, you can just throw it away, wipe your hands clean of it, because it's too much work.
Just the motherfucker that wrote it didn't think that we should be living by what they thought. He wrote a thing about how occasionally the Constitution should be gotten rid of and rewritten because his words were that making their ancestor, or their opposite of ancestors, making their progeny live. Yeah, making the descendants live by, the standards set by their barbarous ancestors is like making a grown man wear a jacket that fit him when he was a child. Like, Thomas Jefferson couldn't get that spark of humanity when he looked in the eyes of his slaves. Wasn't like a fun trick his brain was playing, but he could understand that, like, we're going to think he's an asshole one day. If you want to say something, go ahead. I need a second.
I don't have anything to say about that. It's true. And he had a mistress. He had a bunch of kids.
Is it a mistress when you own her?
True. Yeah. I read a whole thing about, like, it was a whole thing. So I said mistress because it was easier.
That's fair.
Was easier.
Because otherwise you have to start referring to, people who were enslaved as farm equipment and sex dolls.
Well, I mean, I did happen to read an entire article about the practice of concubinage. Which is what having female slaves purchased for the sole purpose of making them their own little house on your land, and buying them and keeping them in that house, and they're there for your enjoyment.
That sounds way too sterile for a time where, like, part of why we did the revolution was to keep slaves. Yeah, it sounds like, just call it sex slavery. Concubinage? Ew.
It was a scholarly article. They had to fancy it up.
They don't. I mean, I one of my favorite academic books is On Bullshit by Henry Frankfurt. Sure about his last name.
That's a lot different than getting your article peer reviewed and published in, like, the journal of whatever it was.
I don't remember what peer reviewed and published. Oh, all I'm saying is that academia is broken if you have to PC sex slavery. That's what it was. It was human sex trafficking. But trying to whitewash that.
Yeah. Especially since a lot of them didn't get freed until, like, after the dude dies. He, like, puts them in his will to, like, be freed. It's like, you could have just freed them soon. Like, you just really, like, truly enjoyed it, and you had the kids and stuff. Like, you just put it in your will to have them freed. You don't even guarantee that they're going to be freed. Somebody else could have screwed them over. You just wanted them around to enjoy until you died, and then it was like,
there was an industry off of freeing slaves by leveraging that you weren't going to help somebody make sure their soul goes to heaven unless their slaves are freed when they died. The Diary of John Woolman is a bonkers read. America used to be the exact same kind of insane it is now. Back to the episode. So Alito tries to slide the idea by that Roe can't be similar to other privacy-based rights because abortion ends fetal life. Much in the same way that if you have a foot-shaped piece of leather that you throw away, you've ended pre-shoe construction. And he refers to what the lawsuit calls an unborn human being, which that was put in for pathos. That was it. That was put in because that way, if you don't rule to save an unborn human life, you then have to be attacked for not saving a baby. That's all it was. That's just in there for rhetoric and propaganda.
Of course.
And it shouldn't have made its way into the opinion. And the thing, and part of that being part of like pathos and part of rhetoric is the fact that if I'm writing something and I describe a moose and then I call it like a fish, right? Like I describe a moose, this is a guppy. It's still a moose. It doesn't matter what you call it, right? It's still the thing everybody else recognizes as moose. Just everybody thinks I'm stupid now. Just as related to what the assholes at the women's unhealth clinic call a cluster of cells.
Do you mean crisis pregnancy centers?
They call themselves Jackson Women's Health.
Okay.
So I was going with Jackson Women's Unhealth, which is petty, stupid, and childish and a dumb thing to call them, but fuck them.
I just assumed you were talking about like generally that the whole practice, not just one specific local.
No, I meant the one specific center because their phrasing made it into the opinion. They in filings they called it an unborn human life because those kinds of centers are just lie factories. That's all they are. They just lie to women. When those women are scared and vulnerable. And I hate them and they're evil. Thesis of the show. Everything religion touches is evil. I'm not even sure that Jackson Women's Health is a like recognized religious organization, but I still feel this comfortable saying they are religious. After we find out that all you have to do is call a fetus an unborn human life and the Supreme Court will go, yep, that's how we're going to connect it. We're given some things to debunk. The first thing is, according to the court's findings, there is a heartbeat at 5 or 6 weeks. Firstly, who gives a shit? Stop romanticizing hearts. They're an organ. They're a stupid organ. They break all the time. They're the only organ that like doesn't even try to heal itself. They just build up scar tissue. And then you die. They're a stupid organ that doesn't work and has nothing to do with how we measure life. Right? Like if say there was a vice president who was completely evil and people kept calling him a heartless prick and then he had a whole bunch of heart attacks and then he had a pump installed that allowed him to live without a heartbeat, we would not say that he is dead. It's unrelated because we're not dead during heartbeats. Boom, boom, dead. Boom, boom, dead. Boom, boom, dead. It's unrelated because when you're doing a heart transplant, when you stop the heart, when you take it out or before you turn it back on, when you plug it back in or however the fuck heart transplants work, that person's not dead. Like that we don't measure life by heartbeat. We measure life by neurological activity. But it is kind of interesting because that's not actually true. A lot of what you hear is the sound of the ultrasound because ultrasounds kind of work by echolocation. And what they're actually is
just bouncing off of stuff.
It's literally, it's just ultrasound bouncing around. It's just above, it's signals outside of the sound register. It's just, so it picks up noises sometimes because it's designed to pick up noise, sound wave-ish is. But what would be the heart is forming between about then and 9 weeks. And what it is at that point is it's just a little like S shape of cells that is figuring out how to wiggle that eventually becomes the heart. So to say that little S line of cells is representative of a heartbeat is to say that the fact that my sperm wiggle in a petri dish is representative of the fact that they are people who can swim. Maybe one day, not right now. And a few weeks after 9 weeks is when the brain connects to the heart. Like before that, they're just doing a thing. And it takes a few weeks for the brain to start controlling the heart in progress. And it's at 25 weeks that the capillaries start to form, which interestingly is shortly or is about the time of the first trimester cutoff. And at that point, the capillaries are forming and they're filling with blood, which, if the heart's going to be that important, it seems like having capillaries that do things with blood seems a little bit more important as a step in development.
Yeah, that should probably come sooner if it matters so much.
And if you want to talk about when the baby's heart is fully, or at this point in the conversation that I'm at, and the rest of you are catching up, slowpokes, the atria close at birth. So if you want to talk about a baby's heart, it's not done forming until birth.
And it can still fuck up on the way. So
I was born with a premature arterial heartbeat. My heartbeat wasn't beating at the right rhythm when I was born. My heart is so white that it could not carry a beat when I was born.
It just couldn't get that left.
Couldn't. So
yeah, I had something like that too when I was born, I think, but I grew out of it or whatever the fuck. So yeah, it's
scary for the parents. I assume I probably didn't know what was happening. Damn it, it's cold out here. It's probably my main concern. What they're referring to as a heartbeat is a wiggling mass of cells that finishes becoming a heart around 35 weeks later. They say at 8 weeks, the unborn human being begins to move about in the womb. So, who gives a shit? If moving is the metric by which we are measuring life, right? And because at this point, the Supreme Court is referring to it as an unborn human being, it seems like they are, right? It seems like that's the assumption there, is that there's something human about it. A dead person being hit with a defib, jolting from the electric shock, is alive, if that's how we're going to measure at what point do you start and stop being a human being. Every time somebody else clear and hits a corpse, the corpse will jolt because we run on electricity. And it goes, and they're alive. That means that the orc that was twitching because Gimli's axe was stuck in his spine that Legolas shot was actually alive.
Not for long.
No, so it's just get the fuck out of here with that. At 9 weeks, all basic physiological functions are present, which is interesting because it implies that Samuel Alito does not digest. He has no actual heartbeat. He does not breathe, and he doesn't do a lot of eating or drinking, which, I don't know, it seems like those seem like pretty basic physiological functions. I assume his temperature regulates himself. If I found out that he was cold-blooded and he had to sun himself on a rock to keep himself from freezing to death, I wouldn't fucking doubt it. Fucking snake. Because the fetus isn't. It's not regulating its own body temperature. It's taking it. The only reason it's not freezing to death is because of the now forced use of the host's bodily resources. At 10 weeks, the hair, fingernails, and toenails begin to form. Cool. At that point, it's a fish monster. So it's beginning the process to becoming a ape monster. At 11 weeks, the diaphragm, which is generally probably important for most or all of the basic physiological functions, has started developing. And quoting Gonzalez v. Carhart, he or she, I'm going to go with it because fuck him, may move about freely in the womb, which I thought it was already doing. But also, is a fish a person? I don't have a fish. I was talking about my fish I want to have. Is the fish a person? It's moving about freely in the tank. Is sperm a person? It moves about freely in the womb. That's how conception happens. They found that most abortions after 15 weeks employed dilation and evacuation procedures, which involve the use of surgical instruments to crush and tear the unborn child, which, like, that also happens when you eat veal. And it concluded that the, quote, intentional commitment of such acts for non-therapeutic or elective reasons is a barbaric practice, dangerous for the maternal parent, and demeaning to the medical profession. I imagine...
How do you know it's not therapeutic?
I would think it would be.
It's therapeutic to not have to deal with
I imagine it is therapeutic to not be used as an incubator. That middle part also is just a lie. It's just a blatant lie.
17,000th of 1%, which is super small, out of every 100,000 abortions performed between the years of 1998 and 2010, had fatal complications. I don't know what year I was thinking of. Mortality rate in the U.S. for the year of 2020 was actually 34 times greater than abortion. During the 12-year study for the fatality rate for abortion, there was a total of 108 women that had a fatal incident occur. An average of 700 women a year die during childbirth alone.
Separately, imagine first they place the patient under anesthesia. Then they make an incision. Depending on how they're doing the procedure, it affects whether it's periareolar, inframammary, or transaxillary. The next step is they take a ball of cohesive silicone gel and through a small incision, they force it in using a variety of clamps and forceps and force until it is wedged between the muscle and fat that have been forcefully separated by the procedure, at which point you are sewn back up and have weeks, months maybe, of recovery for a non-therapeutic elective procedure. That to me sounds pretty gross, but I would never fault anybody for getting a breast implant for whatever the fuck reason they wanted to, including but not limited to if that reason is showing them to me.
Actually, breast augmentation has a higher rate of mortality than abortion. Arguably, any elective procedure where you're needing to use anesthesia is going to come with a higher risk of mortality than you'd have with just getting an abortion because, they've got to put you under and there's always a chance that you don't come back up. And then, of course, breast augmentation is the whole, the thing could burst or leak or whatever, and that could make you sick. So,
everything that is present in any operation that isn't, or any procedure that isn't also present in an abortion, it makes sense that it would raise the mortality risk. You're not going to find out that you're deathly allergic to anesthesia during an abortion. So That was all the introduction.
Editing Phineas again. I hope you got something out of the episode. Maybe enjoy isn't quite the right thing. I am able to be found on Twitter at the letter X Essential Panda. C is able to be found at Sheikah Shaman, SHEIKAH Shaman. Some research was done by the Lady 12 Gauge. She can be found on Twitter at Wolfie of Doom. She's not really on Twitter though, so don't expect to see a lot from her. The show can be found at Apostasy Powered. God, there's a lot of Twitter handles. They're just going to keep piling up, I assume. And the Patreon is patreon.com/apostasypowered. And it's patreon.com/apostates playground. I changed it. I'm going by, my brain is still 2 years ago. And the website is theapostatesplayground.com. Emails can be sent to poweredbyapostasy@gmail.com. Unless it's hate mail, in which case it can be just shoved all the way up your butt.